actor and scriptwriter. Been in the industry for a very long time.
A very long time.
Most notably for Asuka from Genesis Evangelion.
Yes.
And a long time convention guest. What was the first convention you were invited to as a guest?
The first convention that I was at as a guest was Project ACON, and that was in 1997, I guess May of 1997. I was only kind of a sort of guest there. I showed up and they gave me a guest badge. They didn't have a whole lot of guests, so I guess that was all right. And then the next year, 1998, I got invited back again, as more of an official guest. The funny thing was, when I went there the first time, and I had this badge that said special guest, I didn't really think anything. I guess I thought everybody got a badge that said special guest, so I did a couple panels, I signed some autographs. It was pretty weird.
And how did it feel to attend your first convention, or I guess first couple conventions as a guest?
Well, that was really strange, attending my first convention, like I said, 1997. Voice actors were just kind of starting to go to conventions. There had been, not a lot, but a few AnimeCons here in the U.S. up to that point. There were just maybe a few a year. There weren't a lot of them. There weren't 2 or 3 every single weekend all over the country. And voice actors were kind of just starting to go to conventions, so I was a little apprehensive about that, about how I would be accepted as a voice actor, because there was still the huge sub versus dub debate. And I can distinctly remember the first person who ever asked me for an autograph. I didn't even know what he was asking me. I couldn't comprehend that he wanted me to sign his item, whatever. I don't remember what I signed, but I remember him asking me, and he said something about signings, like doing signings, and I thought he was asking me about signing up for the mailing list. I was sitting at the ADV booth. I didn't really know what to do there, so I just helped him sell VHS, because that's what there was, and I think there was some laser discs and posters. So I was just helping him sell stuff. I didn't really know what else to do, and this guy asked me about signings, and I said, oh, and he's like, you want to sign up for the mailing list? Okay, it's over here. And then he was trying to ask me, but I don't know if he was embarrassed or what, but then the lady who was standing next to me, Janice Williams, she said, Tiffany, he's asking you for your autograph. And I said, oh, no, that's not what you're asking me, is it? And of course it was. And then I signed like half a dozen things for that guy, so wherever he is.
Do you see a difference between going to conventions like 12 years, 13 years ago, as opposed to attending conventions now as a guest?
I tell you, the difference between going to conventions 10 and 12 years ago and doing conventions now is like night and day. It's so vastly different. For one thing, with the advent of DVDs, and now you get sub and dub on the same thing, there's the whole sub and dub debate is more or less dead, because the whole debate then centered around was, you were going to spend about $30 to buy a videotape that was going to have 2 episodes on it. And if you were going to spend your $30 for your 60-minute videotape, what were you going to spend it on? Were you going to buy the version that was in Japanese with English subtitles, or were you going to buy the version that was dubbed into English? So that's why there was this big war. And that has essentially disappeared, And yeah, there are people that still argue the merits of one versus the other, but it doesn't really matter, because now for $30 you can get about 6 episodes that are subbed and dubbed, so that's probably one of the biggest things. And also the fact that the voice actors are pretty readily accepted now. We're not outcast or stoned or anything like that. And of course, the really big difference is how many conventions there are. There used to be what people would refer to as convention season, meaning mainly the summer months. There's no convention season now. There's a convention every single weekend of the year. In fact, there's usually 2 or 3. And some weekends there might be 5 or 6 conventions in one weekend in various parts across North America. So that's incredible. The fact that almost anyone can expect that there's going to be an anime convention sometime during the year within, let's say, less than 100 miles of where they live. There's so many different levels of how conventions have changed in every possible way. Oh, and girls. There's so many more girls. I mean, now it's got to be at least 50-50, male and female, and it used to not be that way.
Have you ever attended conventions as just a regular attendee?
I attended the very first convention that I ever attended was in, I guess, the fall, probably about September of 1996. It was the very first convention that I ever went to. It was a Star Trek convention. And yeah, and I am a Trekkie, and that was my first one. And at that point, it was before I'd ever gone to any AnimeCons. That was my very first convention. And I wasn't just a regular paid attendee at that convention. So that was really the only convention that I've ever done just as an attendee and not as a guest.
What do you like most about going to anime conventions?
Well, anime conventions are really special because I'm pretty much a nerdy person. I'm into, science fiction and like I said, going to the Star Trek convention, and I'm into this kind of stuff. I am a geek, and it's neat that I think that's the thing that everybody likes about it is they can come and be around other people who are like them and get along. And people that are from different backgrounds, different socioeconomic groups, different racial backgrounds, religious backgrounds, and so on, that all just kind of disappears into the background and everybody really gets along. And I love the camaraderie at anime conventions and the way that people just accept one another for who they are. And that's probably my very favorite thing about anime conventions.
What type of questions do you like to be asked by the attendees?
It's hard to say exactly what type of questions I like to be asked. I'm always excited when I get a new question or a question that's kind of a different spin on something. I don't mind that everybody asks, what's your favorite anime? What's your favorite character? How did you get started in voice acting? How can I be a voice actor? I mean, they're those same like 6 or 8 or 10 questions that you get at every single convention. And I try to come up with some new, exciting, different way of answering them, but there's not that many different ways of answering how did you get started because there's only one story. So I don't know, it's interesting when people will ask me when they think up something new, a different spin on something, a different way to look at it. So I don't know, I like getting asked questions I haven't been asked before. And that was a question I haven't been asked before.
Do you have any funny stories about attending conventions? You must have a million.
I have like hundreds of funny stories about attending conventions, and most of them are well beyond the PG mark, to be honest with you. I guess one of the funny ones is the one that I was just saying about the guy asking me for the autograph, and I didn't know that because he wasn't using the word autograph, he was saying signing, talking about a time for signings, and when I realized that he wanted me to sign something, that was really crazy. And I mean, I've had a lot of people ask me to sign unusual things over the years, most of which I've done willingly, although I do remember many years ago there was a kid, and he obviously had a brand new pair of sneakers, and they're really expensive. And this kid was 13 or 14 years old, and he took off his shoe, brand new shoe, really expensive shoe, and I said, I am not going to write on your shoe, young man, because your mother's going to kill you if you get home, and I have just written something on your brand new shoes, so give me something else to sign. So, there's a few things like that. There was a guy who I signed his parole card one time. I don't even know if it's legal, but I figured they weren't going to come after me for it. And, of course, I get all the time people come up to me and say, hey, do you remember me? You signed my poster at that con 5 years ago. And I'm like, I've signed like a million posters. But this guy with the parole card, he came back to me a year later same convention, and he said, "Hey, Miss Grant, do you remember me?" "No, I'm sorry." And just as I'm starting to say I don't, he pulls out and he goes, "You signed my parole card?" I said, yes, I do remember. So if I saw him again in person, I wouldn't probably remember him until he pulled out the parole card. But I've had a million crazy stories at AnimeCons. Most of them are good ones, and anytime something crazy or weird or stressful happens, I just say, well, that's going to go into my Tales of Con Horror panel. And they usually do, and that panel could go for hours.
What's the furthest you've traveled as a guest for a convention?
I would say the farthest place that I have been at a convention would be Auckland, New Zealand. I guess geographically, I live in Houston, Texas, that's about the farthest point on Earth that I could go to and not, probably that is, I don't think I could go to a farther place. I think I've done it.
How did that convention compare to conventions in the U.S. or any other international conventions you've gone to?
Well, yeah, I've gone to several international conventions actually, and that particular convention in Auckland, it's called Armageddon Con, and that was their 10th year, so they were pretty good at it, and they had an attendance of about 30,000 people, so it was a very large event. It was in a multi-storied facility that was about 5 or 6 floors, and each floor kind of had their own thing. And so our area, we had this area that was like the anime area. And, you know, wherever I've done conventions, Ireland, I've done a lot of conventions, different areas in Canada, Australia. There's really, I think, a lot more similar than there is different. You know, just people are very avidly into whatever they're into, if it's anime or gaming or sci-fi. And they're usually, like I said, my favorite thing about conventions, everybody's open and accepting, and that's usually pretty much the case. And I have a great time.
Is there a convention you would like to go to but haven't? Patrick said that you have a goal of attending every anime convention in every state.
Yes, I would like to make sure everyone is aware of this. I didn't double check before I came here, but I think this is about my 36th state. So I'm getting, I'm well over that hump at this point. I've gone to cons in about 35 or 36 states, and I've done a convention in actually the District of Columbia as well. And I kind of like to do one in every Canadian province, but I think that's probably not going to happen. I mean, some of them are really small and remote. So I am next month doing my 5th Canadian province, so that's very exciting. But there is one in particular that I would like to go to. It's in Glasgow, Scotland, and I used to live in Scotland. And when I did the convention in Ireland a couple of years ago, I did, after the convention, go over and spend about 10 days vacationing in Scotland, catching up with a lot of old friends and things like that. So I would love to go there, just because I love Scotland and I used to live there. So I love traveling. I love going to different places, meeting people. But I'm convinced that at some point in the not too distant future, I'm going to meet my goal of doing a convention in all 50 states. Kentucky, I'm talking to you.
Hopefully you can reach that. It'll be fun to see. Maybe Patrick can track you on his website. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.